Story 1. He was never caught because I could never prove he was there. This happened to me in late 2018 in a small duplex I rented just outside Minneapolis. It was a quiet neighborhood, mostly retirees and families. I had just gotten a new job and was working remotely, which meant I was home most of the time, and I liked that. The routine comforted me. Every morning I made the same coffee, walked the same path in the park nearby, and listened to the same playlist when I cleaned. That sameness, that rhythm, is probably what made me notice the difference so quickly. The first thing I remember was my toothbrush. I always brushed after breakfast, always. But one morning, it was already wet when I picked it up. At first, I thought maybe I'd rinsed it the night before and forgotten. It bothered me more than it should have, but I moved on. Then my Spotify queue was different. I opened it to clean one afternoon, and it was already playing. It wasn't my music, not really. It was the same artist, but a different playlist, like someone trying to pick what I'd like based on past choices. A few tracks I didn't recognize, but none were completely off. That was the strangest part. It didn't feel wrong. It felt off by inches. One evening, I left the house for a walk around 6 p.m. I got back at 6:42 exactly. I know because I always checked the doorbell cam playback when I returned. A habit. One that started after I thought a neighbor was stealing packages. That night, when I opened the app, the timeline had a blank gap. The feed jumped from 6:13 to 6:43, nothing, just a 30-second chunk, cleanly missing. I told myself maybe the software glitched, or maybe the Wi-Fi cut out, though I'd never seen it do that before. But over the next few weeks, it kept happening, always right after I left. Sometimes 20 seconds, sometimes less than a minute, but always just enough time to miss someone walking to the door. One morning I noticed the back door blinds were tilted, slightly. I always leave them straight because the morning light hits them, and any angle makes lines across the TV. I flattened them, and the next morning, same tilt again. I set my phone camera on a shelf to record the living room for a few hours while I worked in the back room. When I checked the footage, the screen was black, not a corrupted file. The camera had been turned off manually. It was small things at first. A mug moved, keys not on their hook, a sock I'd dropped in the laundry room showing up folded on the bed. I started documenting everything. Photos of rooms, timestamps of my exits, screen captures from the doorbell cam. But there was never anything. I called the police once, explained what was happening. The officer was polite, took notes, but told me plainly, there's no sign of forced entry, no theft, no threat. Maybe you're stressed, and it's affecting your memory. I knew what they were thinking. That I was living alone, working too much, imagining patterns. But I knew I wasn't. I know what it feels like to forget something, and this wasn't that. The scariest part wasn't what was missing. It was how precisely nothing ever seemed wrong. It was the feeling of being stalked not by a person, but by your own memory, just subtle enough to stay out of reach. And that doorbell cam, I replaced it. New brand, new app. First week, everything worked fine. Then one morning, I checked the log. 8:01 a.m. to 8:01:37, skipped. Exactly 36 seconds gone again. I decided to test it, to prove it wasn't all in my head. I'd read once that small items were used in museums to detect vibration, coins arranged in specific ways. I dropped 7 coins in the hallway outside my bedroom, each about a foot apart. A penny, 2 nickels, a dime, a quarter, another penny, a dime, and a Canadian coin I kept for luck. I took a photo. The next morning they were stacked. 4 stacks. The first had 2 coins, the next had 3, then 5, then 7, prime numbers. It looked too intentional to dismiss. I didn't touch them, just photographed them again and left them in place. That night I went to sleep early. Door locked, hallway light on. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of a metal clink. Just one. Then nothing. When I checked in the morning, the coins had been arranged in a curve, not stacked, just spaced into a gentle arc. I stared at it for a long time before realizing something that made my blood run cold. They weren't just arranged randomly. They spelled something. It took me longer than I'd like to admit, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The arrangement looked like a nickname, not written outright, but spelled with letter-like curves. Mimsy. It wasn't a name anyone called me, not my friends, not co-workers, just one person, my grandfather. He used to call me that when I was little. He died in 2009, years before I had Wi-Fi, or home surveillance, or even this house. There was no way anyone should have known that name. I hadn't said it aloud in over a decade. It wasn't on any social media, not in my phone. I sat on the floor of the hallway, staring at the coins, unable to breathe. That afternoon, I called the police again. This time, I didn't mention the coins. I just said someone was coming into the house. They checked the locks again. No signs of forced entry. One officer even tested the doors himself, rattling them hard. They didn't budge. "You sure it's not a sleepwalking thing?" he asked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag him by the arm into the hallway and show him the coins, the pattern, the meaning. But I didn't, because I realized something. If this person could find out a name no one else knew, they could find out anything. I stopped sleeping, kept the lights on, sat in the hallway with my back to the wall, holding a flashlight and a crowbar. But nothing ever happened while I was awake. Only when I slept. I placed a baby monitor by the door. It picked up static at 2:36 a.m. every night, just for a second. Then silence. I set more traps, thin threads of fishing line across doorways, chalk lines on the floor, water in a pan placed just inside the front door. Every morning the lines were intact, the chalk unbroken, the water still. And yet the coins changed again. One morning they were arranged in a straight vertical line. 7 coins, spaced in perfect intervals, the exact length of my spine from neck to tailbone. I measured. Eventually I gave up on the police. I made an appointment with a therapist. I thought maybe if I could talk through it, I'd start to believe it wasn't real, or at least get some sleep. She was quiet as I explained everything. The toothbrush, the music, the gaps in the recordings, the coins. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked a question that stopped me cold. "You mentioned this before," she said. "Last year, same coins, same house, same name. Mimsy, right?" I shook my head. "No, this is my first session." She blinked slowly. "We had 6 appointments last summer. You stopped showing up in August." I told her that wasn't possible. I'd never been in therapy before. I'd only booked the appointment 2 days ago. She opened her laptop, clicked, turned it toward me. There it was. My name, my birth date, my photo, 6 sessions, June through August. Same provider, same location. I don't know what scared me more, the idea that I had forgotten a full summer of therapy, or the idea that someone else had gone in my name. I asked her to describe the woman she met. "Quiet," she said. "Wore her hair the same way you do now. Same coat, I think. She always carried a small notebook and wrote things in it during sessions. That's unusual. Most people just talk. I've never owned a notebook. When I got home, I found one, small, spiral-bound, in my nightstand. First page, just my name written over and over again, in handwriting I didn't recognize. The second page had a list. Toothbrush, 638 coins. Rearrange in silence rewind cam, 37 seconds. Don't speak to the therapist again. I sat in the living room and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I called the police again. They came. They walked the house. They were polite. But all they said was, "There's no sign of forced entry." I asked them to dust for prints. They said, "We can't unless a crime's been committed." They suggested counseling. I didn't tell them about the notebook. I didn't tell them that someone was mimicking my routines with enough precision to walk around in my life undetected. That night, I slept in my car. When I woke up, there was a note on my windshield. It said, "You were in my spot." To this day, I don't know what they wanted. And I never saw them again. Story 2. Every time I called the cops, the house looked normal again. This happened in 2021, right after I bought my first home. It was a foreclosure sale just outside of Denver. Old house, cheap, needed work, but it felt like a win. I was 32, single, quiet life. The house had 3 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a massive crawl space I told myself I'd never use. I moved in during spring, thinking the place would feel lighter when the snow melted. It didn't. The weirdness didn't start loud. The first thing was just a door that didn't behave. There was a narrow door in the hallway leading to the attic. I'd taped it shut with blue painter's tape to remind myself not to mess with it. I had no reason to go up there. A week later, the tape was gone. I figured maybe the humidity peeled it off. I put more on. This time 2 strips, one across the knob, one down the edge. The next morning, both strips were missing. Not torn, not hanging, just gone. The paint was clean. I checked the attic door, still shut, still locked. I felt weird about it, but moved on. I taped it again and started checking every morning. Each time the tape was gone, I replaced it with heavier duct tape. Same result. On the 6th day, something changed. The tape wasn't missing, it had been moved. All 3 pieces were stuck cleanly to the inside of the front closet door. Parallel, perfectly spaced. I hadn't opened that closet in days. I stood there a long time, staring at the strips, wondering if I had done it, sleepwalking maybe. But when I pulled them off and looked at the adhesive, it was dusty. The dust matched the attic door, not the cleaner closet surface. That's when I decided to mark every interior door in the house. Just a sliver of masking tape, bottom left corner. 12 doors total, counting closets. I logged them in a notebook. Placement, time, color. The next morning, 7 were missing. Not the same 7 from the day before, not even grouped by floor, random. At least that's what I thought. But when I looked closer, I realized the missing tape followed a pattern. The door locations, when sketched out, made the number 071389, my birthday. It felt impossible, too exact. I told myself maybe I was making connections where there weren't any, that it was all a coincidence, until it happened again, and again. I switched to different tape, blue, red, green, and it still happened, always forming 071389, even when I changed where I placed them. One morning, I found the strips arranged in a perfect spiral on the kitchen floor. That's when I called the police. They came by, checked everything, found no signs of entry, told me it might be settling stress, maybe the house shifting and the tape coming off. I showed them the notebook, the pattern. One officer smiled, not in a friendly way, more like someone humoring a patient, and said, "It's not illegal for a house to creak." I started filming everything. Left my phone on all night, propped against a bookshelf. But the file was always corrupted the next day. Not deleted, just static, white flickering static. I bought a proper indoor cam, installed it in the hallway. It recorded fine for 2 days. Then one morning, it was on the floor, face down, battery drained, footage gone. I taped just one door that night. My bedroom door, one strip, tiny, just enough to be visible. I woke up and it was gone. I found it later, folded in half, tucked inside my pillowcase. I'd lived there for nearly 2 months before I met any of the neighbors. It wasn't for lack of trying. People kept to themselves. No waves, no small talk. The houses were close together, but I rarely saw movement in the windows. No kids playing outside. The guy across the street, tall, bald, always wore the same grey hoodie, seemed to actively avoid me. I'd see him taking out trash, and the moment I stepped outside, he'd walk back inside without a word. I asked the mailman once if he knew anything about the previous owner. He paused, looked at my house, then just said, "They didn't forward their mail." That was it. By late June, I noticed a shift. People didn't just avoid me, they started avoiding my house. A woman jogging with a stroller crossed the street before reaching my driveway, without looking. Another man walked his dog along the sidewalk. Then, as they approached, the dog froze. Wouldn't step closer, started whining. He didn't try to coax it, just turned around and walked away. The most obvious incident was with the garbage bins. I dragged mine out for pickup one Wednesday morning and saw that every other bin on the street had been placed on the opposite side, forming a perfect arc around my driveway. Not a mistake, not a coincidence. The next day, I knocked on a few doors. One guy opened, saw me, and shut it immediately. Another woman, elderly, cracked her door just an inch and said, "I'm sorry, I can't talk about that." I finally got someone to answer. A teenager, maybe 17, named Mason. He lived in the house behind mine. When I asked him what he knew, he hesitated. "I mean, it's just a house, right?" he said. "Right," I replied, "but something's off about it. You feel it too?" He nodded slowly. "My dad doesn't even look at it. Says it's better not to. Says the more you notice it, the more it notices you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded exactly like what I was afraid of. Mason got quiet. Then he said something I'll never forget. "We don't talk about that house, because then we see it too." I asked what that meant. He just shook his head and shut the door. That night, I found something written in chalk on my front step. It was faint, like someone tried to wipe it off. 3 words: "Don't name it." I didn't sleep. It was a Thursday when the police came again. This time, I didn't call them. I got home from work around 6:10 p.m. and saw 2 squad cars idling in front of my driveway. Lights off, doors open. An officer approached immediately. "You called about a break-in?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't." He frowned and asked my name. I gave it. He asked to check inside the house. Said dispatch had received a call from my phone number, claiming someone was in the attic. I unlocked the door and let them in. They walked room to room while I stood in the entryway, trying to make sense of it. I pulled out my phone, opened the call log. There it was, 5:47 p.m., a 12-second outgoing call. To a number labeled him. I stared at it. I didn't have a contact called him. The number wasn't saved in my phone yesterday. I hadn't created that contact. I hadn't called anyone. When I clicked on the call to expand the details, the screen glitched, flickered, then reset. The contact was gone, replaced with a blank call to unknown. The officers didn't find anything, said the attic was sealed. One of them made a joke about raccoons. I wasn't laughing. Later that night, I reviewed the call log again. Same number, same label. Him, 5:47 p.m. But this time the duration said .0. I went to my voicemail. There was a new one. It was blank, just static, for 7 seconds. I listened again, holding my breath. At the very end, right before the beep, a whisper, faint, 2 syllables. I played it back again. Again. It sounded like, "Stay inside." The voicemail deleted itself while I was still listening. I started sleeping at a motel. Took a week off work. When I came back to the house, it looked cleaner, brighter. The tape on the doors was gone. The chalk washed away. Everything looked normal. But that night, I set my phone to record while I slept. Propped it against a lamp. In the morning, I watched it. At 2:17 a.m., the video flickered, cut to black, for exactly 12 seconds, then resumed. Everything looked the same, until I noticed the closet door. It had moved, slightly open, just enough to see that something had been inside, and just before the video cut out, a shadow moved, quick, upright, but there was no one in the house. I called the police again. They walked through, checked everything, smiled, said nothing was wrong. I showed them the video. When they watched it, the shadow wasn't there, only static, only silence. I never called again. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. He watched me every day, but the police said he didn't exist. This started in early 2022. I had just moved into a garden-level studio, the kind where your windows are half below street level, facing the sidewalk. It was cheap. It was quiet. I needed both. The place was fine. Old paint, noisy pipes, drafty in winter. But I liked it. I liked that it was mine. I noticed him the 3rd day after moving in. I was brushing my teeth in the morning when I looked up and saw movement in the window. A man, standing on the sidewalk, not walking, just still. He wasn't close, maybe 5 feet from the glass, just far enough that I couldn't make out his features, but he was looking down, not at a phone, at me. I froze, and then, just like that, he walked off. I thought maybe he was just passing by, maybe he was looking at something else. I told myself not to overthink it, but the next morning, he was there again. Same spot, same stillness, same direction of his gaze. I only saw him for a second. I turned to grab my phone, and by the time I looked back, he was gone. That day, I started filming. Propped my phone on the kitchen counter, angled toward the window. I set it to record every morning while I got ready. The first recording was corrupted. The second was glitchy. Static bars cut through the image. The moment where the man should have appeared, the screen froze. I tried again, over and over. I bought a different phone thinking it might be a hardware issue. Same problem. Then one afternoon, I took a selfie by the window, just for fun, to test the lighting. I didn't notice it at first, but when I went back to edit it later, I saw him, in the reflection behind me. A man, wearing a dark coat, no hat, standing outside, looking into the window, into the camera, directly into the lens. The worst part was his expression. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smiling. He just looked like someone waiting for something. The police didn't help. I showed them the photo. They squinted, zoomed in, and one of them said, "Could be a shadow from the fence, hard to say." I asked them to check the area, look for security footage, talk to neighbors. They said unless I had footage of him trespassing or making a threat, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I install blinds. I already had them. I closed them every night, and every morning when I opened them, he was already there. The dreams started soon after. At first they weren't disturbing, just long blank hallways, flickering lights, the soft scrape of someone walking just ahead of me, out of sight. But one night I dreamed I was in my apartment, standing by the window. It looked exactly the same. The same dishes in the sink, same jacket on the chair, except I wasn't in my body. I was outside, on the sidewalk, looking in, watching myself. It was still me in the window, same pajamas, same messy bun, but I couldn't move. I couldn't stop staring at my own face. Then the reflection in the glass started to shift. It was subtle at first, a tilt of the head, a change in posture. Then a different expression, one I wasn't making, one I'd never make. I watched myself, or what looked like me, raise a hand and wave. I didn't wave back. The hand pressed against the glass. A slow, deliberate motion. And then, without blinking, the version of me in the window began to smile. Not my smile, his. I woke up, gasping. It was 4:37 a.m. The window blinds were open. I don't remember opening them. I started avoiding mirrors, windows, any reflective surface. I didn't trust what I was seeing anymore. One afternoon, I passed the hallway mirror and caught something in the corner. I turned back, but it was gone. I started checking every photo on my phone, screenshots, random snaps, anything with a reflection. In one, I saw him again, just the silhouette this time, in the microwave door. He was inside my kitchen. I stopped taking pictures after that. I started using tape on the window, crisscross, thick black lines, so I couldn't see out. I placed a small mirror by the door, back facing out, just to be safe. And yet, he was still there. Even when I couldn't see him, I felt him. That sense of being watched, of breath that isn't yours, of a gaze with weight. He was outside, but it didn't feel like he needed to be. I woke up one night to a whisper. It was my own voice. But it said a word I'd never say. A name, one I didn't recognize. And when I tried to say it out loud the next day, my mouth wouldn't move. The last time I saw him was in late August. It was a Friday. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I'd stopped opening the blinds, stopped answering the door. I was barely eating. I sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the far wall, facing the covered window. I don't know how long I was sitting there. Hours, maybe. Until I felt it, that shift in the room, the pressure. I stood up. slowly. Pulled the tape off the window, strip by strip. My hands were shaking. When the final strip came free, I saw him, closer than ever. He was standing inches from the glass, but not looking through it. He was looking directly at me. He held something in his hand, a cardboard sign. It said, "Now you're watching too." I didn't move, didn't blink. And then, he did. He blinked once, dropped the sign, stepped back, and vanished. I thought that was it, that it was over, but I was wrong, because in the seconds after he disappeared, I saw something else. A person, outside my window. Not him, someone else. A woman, standing exactly where he had been, holding a phone, watching me, and on her phone, a message. I couldn't read it from that distance, but I could see the motion of her finger scrolling, pausing, reading. Her eyes never met mine. She was looking at the window, at something behind the glass. I turned to look behind me. Nothing was there. When I looked back, she was gone. I closed the blinds again, taped them shut, deleted every photo from my phone, moved 2 months later. Different city, different job, different everything. I thought I was free, but last week I passed a mirror in a thrift store. I didn't look directly into it, I just caught the corner. And there, in the background, a woman, not me, staring at me like she knew me, holding a sign. It said, "You saw him too." I didn't buy anything. I left the store, but I keep seeing her, not often, but enough. She stands just far enough away, just out of focus, always watching. And every time, she's holding something new, something I haven't read yet. But I will.